When most Undertale players think of dark moments in the game, their mind gravitates towards the game's more violent route. The act of meticulously killing every enemy in your path, leaving the underground hauntingly hollow, certainly gives the normally cheery game a haunting atmosphere that often gets overlooked in favor of the Sans fight. The Photoshop Flowey fight also draws a lot of attention due to its unsettling amalgamation of creepy imagery that deviates from the game's usual art style. The lead-up to this fight is no less unsettling, with the transition from Asgore's defeat, the game crash, and the glitchy intro sequence. But I think by far, Undertale's most effective use of horror lies in the game's pacifist route. So, just in time for the Halloween season, I'd like to discuss what makes TrueLab such a brilliant addition to the game. What makes TrueLab so interesting is how subtly it's built up throughout the game. As early as Snowdin, you can speak to Snowy and learn about how he ran away from home after a falling out with his father. In the MTT resort, Snowdrake's father discusses that same falling out, mentioning how Snowy's mother died, and criticizing Snowdrake for his terrible puns. It's clear that the loss in this family has left Mr. Drake deeply depressed, and he copes through his comedy routine, even though he says his remarks are not funny. If you explore Alphys' lab, you can find unanswered letters from various monsters, from Froggets to Doggo and even Snowy. At first it's unclear what they're for, but the answer comes in a truly haunting fashion during the True Lab itself. Bratty and Caddy allude to Alphys' work and how she never seems to do anything with her royal scientist role. This combined with Alphys' own hints of guilt, culminating in the date and her letter before the True Lab, paint a picture that something is amiss. That, and the fact that even the most passive neutral runs prevent you from getting true closure with Alphys, leaves the mind to wander and wonder. So when Flowey appears and mentions how you need to get to know Alphys better, it's really no surprise. She once again hints at her guilt and self-destructive view, which only builds throughout the date sequence, which is all about pushing Alphys to come clean about all the lies and secrets she's kept. It all seems simple and cheerful at first, resulting in a goofy training sequence with Papyrus and Alphys jogging off into the distance, and Undyne assuming that things will be alright. But the subsequent Papyrus phone call after the date sets the stage for something potentially dire. A note that reads, "I know you did," doesn't help. Presumably this was written by Flowey to further goad Alphys into action. Her own note is no less worrying, implying that she may not come back and speaking of an untold truth, and telling you how to find it. And when you step into the elevator, it all goes to shit, crashing down in spectacular fashion that truly sets the stage for the scares to come. The moment you leave the elevator, you're left in a dark, grungy hall. There's no background music, merely a long hallway with signs that light up and recount Alphys' research. This crescendos into the final report in this hallway, where Alphys reveals her discovery of determination, the component that allows human souls to persist after death. Suddenly, the repeated phrase of "you're filled with determination" takes on new meaning, and that's just the beginning. When you enter the main hub, the haunting song "Here We Are" kicks in. It's a minor arrangement of Alphys' leitmotif in a funky 10/4 time signature, using the creepy instrumentation of the past from Earthbound to evoke this feeling of unsettling moans. It won't take long for you to find the first of many scattered notes from Alphys hinting to the puzzle, but because the notes are so fragmented, it also adds to the atmosphere. The locked door and forked paths add to the unease, forcing players to take a left turn and wander into what seems like a hospital room. Turning on the sink leads to the reveal of the first and arguably most mysterious enemies in the True Lab, the Memory Heads. The Memory Heads are odd in that they have no resemblance to any known monsters. Unlike the other amalgamates, when you first interact with them, you're given the options from the pause menu. To actually engage further, you have to select Cell, which lets them speak to you through the receiver. Attacking them yields creepy red text. Item makes them place a harmful bad memory item in your inventory. Add that to their grotesque designs and eerie attacks, and you get a strikingly spooky first fight that's made even eerier by the music choice, Amalgam, which is so off-putting and uncanny due to its lack of a solid key signature. This fight's made even eerier by the fact that you don't even pacify them. You just reject them, and they go away. No resolution like the other fights here, no acknowledgement outside of this interaction. They're there and gone, and that's it. Yet it sets a great precedent for the vibes this area will have. The True Lab scales back its puzzles. It's really just a matter of locating the colored keys and placing them in the correct slot. The simplicity is effective because it puts the focus solely on exploring the lab. The long stretches of walking with no random encounters, with signs giving backstory on the determination experiments out of order, force you, the player, to recognize Alphys' writings yourself and reorganize them. If you wish to see them in chronological order, I'll provide a link in the description, or you can watch my Alfie's analysis that goes much more in depth about the experiments themselves. But I will say, the out-of-order placement adds to the mystery and forces you to try and orient yourself in what is otherwise a disorienting place. The room with the beds, for instance, has another unsettling Easter egg. If you stay in bed for long enough, a mysterious amalgamate will tuck you in. In the shower room, Frisk's movement speed is locked to an even slower pace than the default walking speed, and an uncomfortable ambience plays as a shadow sways behind the shower curtain. In the end, it's a bait and switch, and you're left with the key instead of a follow-through on the scare, which I think is a fun way to pull the rug out from under players' feet. This hallway actually leads to a fork, where you can go into the room with the fans, which starts out with the creepy white specks floating around, or you can go into the determination extractor room. This machine evokes imagery similar to Photoshop Flowing Gift Trot, bringing everything full circle. Additionally, a save point blocks the path, and when you interact with it, you're attacked by lemon bread. This is another effective use of playing with expectations. It's one thing for a sink to spawn a goot monster, but save points are meant to be safe. Lemon bread also shows familiar attributes of existing monsters, unlike the memory heads, and to spare her, you must use your knowledge of past encounters to help her remember who she is. This pattern is used by all the regular amalgamates in the lab. Proceed north and you'll find a room with VHS tapes. The Alfie's report there already sets the mood by talking about how she isn't sure Asgore should ever see the tapes. Then you get backstory on the royal family. It's conveyed without any visuals, merely dialogue between characters. But what starts as a happy couple excited for their new child gets worse and worse as we see Kara and Asriel pranking each other before Asriel reveals how the two children accidentally poisoned Asgore with buttercups. This in turn leads to Kara's plan to use the buttercups to take their own lives so that Asriel can claim their soul and cross the barrier to get 6 more souls and free monster kind. It's just subtle enough that first-time players may not fully grasp what happened, and in a way, the lack of visual feedback adds to the mystery. After all, at this point in the game, we're still led to believe that the fallen human we named is the player character Frisk, and not Kara. So what's going on? Why is Kara the human child the royal family took in? If you enter the refrigerator room before fighting Endogeny, the whole room is full of smog. Interacting with the objects in this state leads to some interesting flavor text that hits different now that Deltarune is out. It talks about a man behind a tree with delicious fruit, for instance, which you later see in Deltarune. Given the fun events also tease at Toby Fox's future project, this was likely deliberate. Activating the fans causes the specks in the air to coalesce into the faceless dog monstrosity Endogeny. This amalgamate lacks the standard battle theme in favor of some unsettling barking ambience. Astute players will recognize its act commands as identical to Greater Dog, and indeed, the way to beat it is to perform them in the exact same order, albeit with more unsettling results. Plus, as the fight intensifies, so too does the animation for Endogeny's idol, getting faster and faster. The ambient audio adds to the stress of the situation, amplified by the enemy's creepy variations on familiar dog attacks. It's twisting what was innocent and cute into something uncanny that really adds to the spook factor here. And then at the end, when you pacify it, you get the catharsis of hearing a muffled version of Dog Song. The mirror room provides some excellent foreshadowing by way of the golden flowers. Though it's not outright confirmed at this point in the lab, the presence of these flowers and the reports that accompany them hint that the vessel Alfie's planned to inject with determination was a golden flower. Isn't that interesting? But just like Lemon Bread uses a save point to spawn, the next enemy, Reaper Bird, uses the exclamation point to transform into a terrifying shape. Though, just like Lemon Bread, this one is recognizable with elements of Whimsin or Whimsalot, Final Frogget, and Astigmatism, albeit altered to form a bird-like creature. At this point, players have probably figured out how to progress the amalgamate fights, unless they started with the mirror room, in which case this is their first clue in how to appease the enemies. However, I think more than strategy, the standout element of this fight is its attack, the Everyman, a strange and unsettling creature whose face gets devoured by butterflies just at the start of the fight. The Everyman remains a lingering mystery in the fandom, as it's appeared in Deltarune as graffiti and as attack projectiles in both Queen and Jevils fights, plus the pop-ups on occasion. For now, though, it's just a funky guy who appears sometimes. Which just leaves one more enemy and one more part of the puzzle to complete. So, back in the refrigerator room, with the fog lifted, things are much clearer. One of the fridges even shakes. But it is not the one holding the amalgamate inside. This is yet another example of Toby playing with expectations, keeping players from getting too comfortable. Speaking of toying with expectations, this final amalgamate fight provides a distinctly different atmosphere. The battle music is a detuned version of the area theme Snowy, which constantly shifts in pitch and tempo. The enemy does not attack, she simply calls out the name of her son. Where before the fights may have been stressful or scary, this one is just sad, as you are tasked with telling her jokes to help her remember. Or you can be a complete jerk and heckle her instead, saying awful things, except the narration confirms you didn't actually do it. This also adds to the unease. With this, you'll have completed the puzzle and the central door will unlock. Interestingly, the monitors do not light up as you make your way down the hallway after passing through an inactive elevator. You enter this dark, grungy room with a generator at the end. The creepy endogyny ambience returns, the amalgamates approach, and Alphys appears to diffuse the tension and finally reveal the truth. It's a sweet moment of self-reflection where Alphys finally clarifies what happened back then and resolves to let the amalgamates free and no longer run from her mistakes. This ties the section up in a neat little bow, but the spooky elements aren't quite done yet, because, as you leave, the previously unlit signs light up with smiley faces. Finally, you get the confirmation that Alphys used the first golden flower as the vessel, and more chillingly, the flower disappeared. The True Lab ends in an eerie phone call where a seemingly unknown voice talks to Kara. On subsequent playthroughs, it's obviously Flowey using his final boss Azrael voice, but the uncertainty of it all in a first-time playthrough disorients the player right as they return to New Home and find the elevator sealed behind them with vines. I think a lot can be learned about atmospheric horror just by looking at the True Lab in Undertale. Rather than relying on cheap jump scares and loud noise, it builds tension through the slowness and stillness and effective sound design. It scatters nuggets of lore, it plays with player comfort and expectation, and by removing random encounters and more active puzzles, you're left wandering and soaking in every detail as you try to make sense of your surroundings. It's simple yet effective, and I think a lot of that is lost in the wider fandom sphere, where many Undertale fanworks lean way too hard into raw edge with stark, bloody imagery, lots of death and destruction, but without the subtle unease found in places like the No Mercy run in True Lab itself. Sometimes less is more, and sometimes the simple shift from a bright and quirky game to a quieter, more reflective atmosphere is enough to make people uncomfortable and uneasy. This is why, more than anything, I think True Lab is Undertale's most well-crafted use of horror tropes and flourishes, and something that deserves more discussion. With that, I just have one more request of you all. Recently, I put out a passion project analyzing the SATAM version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Unfortunately, the video underperformed, so it'd be awesome if you could check it out. I have another Undertale video in the future planned on Gerson, so stay tuned, and we'll see what other non-Undertale Deltarune videos come next, as they tend to perform worse overall. But if you'd like to support my work, including more videos on other subjects that are less likely to perform well algorithmically, please consider checking out my Patreon. I post a lot of work-in-progress scripts, sprites, concept art, and so much more. With that, I wish you all a happy Halloween.